Welcome to The Explainer. I am literally so thrilled you're here today because we're tackling what is honestly the biggest, most profound question of human existence. Today, we are diving deep into the psychology of death and the philosophical reality of what would happen if we actually achieved our wildest dream, living forever. Are you ready to completely reevaluate the way you look at your own lifespan? Let's get started. Okay, let's dive into this with a totally fascinating observation from the ancient philosopher Lucretius. He points out this wild symmetry on our timeline. There was an infinite, massive expanse of time before you were born, and it doesn't bother you at all, right? It just feels like nothing. Well, nature holds this up as a mirror to show us that the eternity after we die is exactly the same. Yet, while the pre-birth eternity doesn't bother us one bit, the post-death eternity absolutely terrifies us. So why is that? Section 1. The hidden terror of death, how mortality subconsciously drives human behavior. Let's move to this and see how it builds. To understand why the eternity of death terrifies us, we kind of have to look at our biology. We're biological organisms, right? We're hardwired to survive, but we're uniquely cursed with the intelligence to know that our survival is only temporary. This builds into what psychologists call terror management theory. Step 1, we are animals totally aware of our own vulnerability and inevitable death. Step 2, this awareness creates a constant, underlying potential for paralyzing terror. I mean, if we thought about it all the time, we literally wouldn't be able to function. So step 3, we create buffers. We invest heavily in cultural worldviews, things like religion, national identity, or our careers, and we strive for self-esteem within those systems. We're desperately trying to become something more than just a biological animal fated for obliteration. So this brings us to a really critical piece of psychological jargon: mortality salience. Researchers have conducted hundreds of studies where they subtly remind people of their own death. And what they've found is just incredible. These reminders don't usually cause immediate, conscious panic. Instead, they create this deep, unconscious need to prove our significance and defend the worldviews that give our lives meaning. When mortality salience is triggered, while people get tribal, they show increased defense of their cultural identity, they dish out harsher punishments to rule breakers, and some even take higher physical risks, like driving recklessly, literally just to prove their own self-worth. They also distance themselves from anything that reminds them they're physical animals. It is wild to realize how much of our daily behavior, our prejudices, and our drive for success is actually just a subconscious defense mechanism against our fear of dying. Section 2. Are you still you? The identity problem in a cured world. So, if the fear of death causes so much psychological terror, what happens if we simply cure it? Well, before we can even figure out if an infinite life would be a good thing, we have to tackle a massive identity problem. If you live for 1,000 years, are you even the same person? Think about how much you've changed since you were a child. Could the traits that define you today possibly stretch across an entire eternity? The philosopher Ray Langton maps out this identity problem beautifully. There are a few different ways we might try to define you over time. If we use bodily continuity, that's incredibly weak over infinite time, right? Our bodies completely regenerate and change. What about psychological continuity, your memories and traits? Research shows our personalities drift radically, even within a normal mortal lifespan. Over centuries, you'd become completely unrecognizable to your past self. Social recognition fails because your network of relationships would constantly turn over. Honestly, unless you rely purely on faith in a spiritual substance, pinning down who you actually are over an infinite timeline is incredibly difficult. In fact, our very vulnerability is exactly what allows us to understand each other. This is a profound point drawn from thinkers like Langton, Hume, and Smith. Our shared mortality makes empathy our greatest resource. Because we know we're fragile and finite, we can project ourselves into the joy and misery of others. If we were invulnerable immortals, we might completely lose this capacity to connect with people from the inside. Section 3. Would immortality be meaningless? The Makovoulos Case and the tedium of forever. But hey, let's assume we can somehow maintain our identity over centuries. We now step right into a philosophical nightmare. Would living forever actually be incredibly boring? Consider the famous thought experiment of Elena Makovoulos. In an opera adapted from a play, Elena is a woman who has lived for 300 years, frozen at the biological age of 42. And her condition? She is entirely consumed by an inescapable, profound boredom. She has outlived her engagement with life. Actually, it's more like she's just been at it for way too long. I mean, imagine literally finishing everything on Netflix and then realizing you still have eternity left to go. No way. Now, what's really interesting about this is how the philosopher Bernard Williams explains Elena's boredom by splitting our wants into two buckets. First, you have conditional desires. These are things you want given that you're already alive, like you want a sandwich because you're hungry. But then there are categorical desires. These are the deep projects that actually give you a reason to stay alive, like fighting for a cause or deeply loving a partner. Williams argues that over an infinite timeline, you would eventually satisfy or just completely lose interest in all of your categorical desires. And the tragic reality of infinite time is surprisingly bleak. Think about it. When there is time for literally everything, nothing deeply matters. All urgency just vanishes. Even our virtues are threatened. How can you have courage if your life is never actually at risk? Friendships weaken because the ultimate sacrifice isn't even possible. Life just becomes this shapeless, endless string of events without any real form. Section 4. Desires versus values. A radical shift in how we view meaning. For a really long time, philosophers just accepted Williams' gloomy verdict. But recently, a thinker named Benjamin Mitchell-Yellin offered a radical critique. Williams was looking at an immortal life purely through the lens of desires. Desires are like commands. You want a thing, you get it, the desire goes out, and you're left completely empty. So the crucial point is that Mitchell-Yellin says we should look at life through the lens of values instead. Values are entirely different. Obtaining what you value isn't the end of the story, it's just the beginning of a long-term relationship of caring for it. Valuing isn't just a fleeting want. It's a whole suite of interdependent dispositions. You think something is good, you track its well-being emotionally, you actively care for it, and you are motivated to protect it. When you truly value something, your engagement doesn't just switch off the moment you acquire it. To ground this, think about your absolute favorite watch. You don't just stop valuing it the second you buy it and put it on your wrist. That would be absurd, right? You continue to protect it, you monitor it so it doesn't get scratched, and you cherish it. You can value things indefinitely. So an immortal life wouldn't necessarily be boring from the inside simply because our values keep us continuously engaged. Section 5. Outliving what we love. The true threat of eternity. But if our internal values save us from boredom, there's still one ultimate complication. You cannot logically continue to actively value something that has ceased to exist. Over thousands of years, your mortal friends and family will inevitably pass away. The natural environments you love will alter or completely vanish. Cultures and institutions will crumble to dust. The real tragedy of immortality isn't that you get bored of yourself, it's that you're left in a world entirely barren of everything you once cherished. When we realize this, our mortality starts to look a lot less like a curse and a lot more like a deeply integrated part of nature. I absolutely love this quote from philosopher Todd May, drawing on a Taoist perspective. Each of us is like a wave on the sea of being. Our death isn't just some terrifying stoppage, it actually has a purpose within a much larger pattern. It clears the way for others to come, making room on the canvas of existence. And this brilliantly illustrates the synthesis of everything we've explored today. The meaning of our lives doesn't come from checking off an infinite list of desires over a never-ending timeline. Meaning comes from fiercely holding on to our values within a world that is fragile and inherently transient. It is the very transience of the world that gives our caring its weight. Which leaves us with a final, profound thought for the day. If living forever ultimately means outliving everything and everyone you value, is the very fragility of life exactly what makes it worth living? I really want you to take that question with you today. Embrace the finite, fragile beauty of the things you value right now. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.